Rewriting history. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we all love. Best discussion, debate, and analysis. Lock it in right here. Like the videos, please. That helps us build the channel. Comment and share the videos on social media. And, of course, subscribe. That way you turn on the bell, get the notifications of when we go live. We are breaking down the 1983 National Championship race here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, because these are the kind of things that we do. And in no other sport anywhere in existence is there a controversy like there is in college football in determining a national champion. It's clearer today than it's ever been, but it's still controversial because of the invitational process, the selection process, not an objective system. And certainly back in the days of 1983, it was even more cluttered. Let's look at it. So in 1983, classic game between Nebraska and Miami to conclude the college football season on the night of New Year's Day, 1984. Nebraska was a giant, a mammoth, colossal giant, and favored by 17 points in the game against Miami. Consensus number one, considered possibly the greatest team of all time. Came in at 12-0 with Turner Gill, Mike Rozier, who won the Heisman Trophy, Irving Fryer as well. They beat Penn State, the fourth-ranked team in the country, to start the season 44-6. Nebraska scored 50 or more points 7 times. They had the one close call at Oklahoma State, the 20th-ranked team in the country, 14-10. They played a good game against Oklahoma as well, the Sooners, of course, and Tom Osborne. That was the traditional rivalry played on Thanksgiving weekend. That was the 28-21 game, but Nebraska won the Big 8, and they finished at 12-0. So they were number one entering the Orange Bowl. Then you also had Texas at number 2, the only other undefeated team in the nation, head coached by Fred Akers, 11-0. They won an important game early in the season at number 5, Auburn, 20-7. That will factor into our discussion, certainly. They had a win against number 8, Oklahoma, 28-16. They beat number 9, SMU, 15-12. They had 4 one-score wins, so it was not a dominant performance by Texas start to finish, but they were 11-0 playing in the Southwest Conference. Then we had Auburn. Auburn would eventually win the national championship according to Billingsley, the College Football Researchers Association, and the New York Times. Also, Rothman and Sagarin named Auburn the national champions. They played by far the toughest schedule of the contenders. Head coached by Pat Dye, of course, Bo Jackson on the team with 1,200 yards and 14 touchdowns. Okay, they played 9 bowl teams, and this isn't when there were 41 bowl games. There were about 15 or 16 bowl games. They played 9 bowl teams. 8 of those teams were ranked in the top 20. There was no top 25 then, so 8 ranked in the top 20, 6 in the top 10. Auburn played an 11-game schedule, 6 teams ranked in the top 10 in the country. They played the SEC schedule, of course, plus Florida State, Texas, Georgia Tech, and Maryland. Before you laugh at Maryland, they were 7th ranked in the country. Think about that. Auburn played an SEC schedule, plus Florida State, Texas, Georgia Tech, and Maryland, who was a top 10 team. That's how good the Auburn Tigers were. Okay, Illinois would not apparently on the surface be a factor in our discussion, but certainly they are. Yes, they got blown out in the Rose Bowl, finished 10-2 near the bottom of the top 10 in the country, but we obviously have to survey the situation going into postseason play. Head coached by Mike White, Illinois was a surprise winner of the Big Ten at 10-1. They lost their opener to Mizzou. Then they went 9-0 in the Big Ten. They beat 4 ranked teams with Jack Trudeau at quarterback and wide receiver David Williams. So Illinois at 10-1. And then you had Miami and head coach Howard Schnellenberger. They were also 10-1 following an opening night loss to Florida, blown out by the Gators 28-3. Then they went on a roll. Their big wins over number 13 Notre Dame 20-0. They beat West Virginia, the 12th ranked team in the country at the time of the game, 20-3, and they beat Florida State 17-16. That sounds familiar in regards to a score because that was the typical Miami-Florida State game for the next 10 years, 17-16 in that one. Florida State was a good team that year, not great at 8-4. And then finally, Georgia factors into this with head coach Vince Dooley. The Bulldogs had won the national championship in 1980, made it to the Sugar Bowl in 82 as the number one team before losing to Todd Blackledge and Penn State, and they were looking to possibly backdoor their way into a national championship, but of course another team would do that. They had lost to Auburn 13-7. They were 9-1-1. They had a tie against Clemson, 16-all. So there you go. Going into the Bowls, Nebraska number 1, Texas 2, Auburn 3, Illinois 4, and Georgia at number 5. This is what happened in the bowl games. In the Rose Bowl, for the first time ever, an unranked team beat a top 5 team. UCLA smacked, I remember it well, Illinois 45-9. UCLA came into the game, get this, how did they ever qualify for a Rose Bowl at 6-4-1? Well, they lost all their games out of conference. They were 6-1-1 in the Pac-12, the Pac-10 then. And again, UCLA dealt Illinois an embarrassing loss, 45-9, and so Illinois finished at 10-2. All right, Cotton Bowl was huge because Texas could have won the national championship. They came in undefeated, number 2. They had a 9-3 lead pretty late in the game. But Texas defensive back Craig Curry muffed a punt, set up Georgia for the game-winning touchdown by John Lastinger. Remember him well with 3:22 left. And Georgia upset Texas. When I say upset, mild upset. Number 7 Georgia over number 2 Texas, 10-9 in the Cotton Bowl. All right, on to the Sugar Bowl that night. So the Sugar Bowl was being played at the same time as the Orange Bowl. It was Michigan of the Big Ten taking on Auburn. Auburn at number 3. Michigan scored a touchdown on its first drive, would not find the end zone or any scoring the rest of the game. 3 Al Del Greco field goals, who would later kick in the NFL for a long time. 3 field goals. And the second, the last 2 were in the fourth quarter. So Auburn comes back to beat Michigan in a slugfest, 9-7. Bo Jackson carried 22 times for 130 yards, and Tommy Agee 16 carries for 93 yards. Auburn beats Michigan 9-7. And then the exciting game of the night in what was expected to be Nebraska's coronation as national champion and Tom Osborne's first at the school. He would have to wait 11 years. Miami jumped out 17-0 behind Bernie Kosar. Also led in the fourth quarter 31-17 as Kosar threw for 310 yards. Nebraska scores a touchdown. Of course, they score the next touchdown to trail 31-30 instead of kicking the extra point, knowing that Texas lost earlier in the day at the Cotton Bowl. Nebraska could have kicked the extra point. Game over, 31-31 tie. For you young folks, realize that in college football prior to 1997, there were tie games. Even in championship situations, tie games. Kenny Calhoun with a pass breakup. Osborne went for the game winner on the 2-point conversion, and Miami beat Nebraska 31-30. Interesting to note that Miami fans, had they lost, could have pointed to a possible illegal forward pitch on the fourth down play, touchdown play from Turner Gill to Jeff Smith. That said, this is the way it worked way back then. If you're not as old as me, you don't remember these days. So we all went to bed thinking, wow, Miami upset Nebraska. Texas lost by 1 point earlier in the day. Auburn won. They've got the best schedule if we were thinking that far ahead, and I don't know that a whole lot of people were at that point, but Auburn won. So we've got 4 teams with 1 loss. Who's the national champion? Well, we didn't know that night. That's not the way it worked. You had to wait until early in the morning when the newspaper came. And you'd open it up. Voila! Miami won the national championship. The Canes leapfrogged 2 teams with the same record to vault from number 5 to number 1 and win its first national championship in school history. The final AP top 5 read like this: Miami number 1, Nebraska 2, Auburn 3, Georgia 4, Texas 5. I gave this some thought. Under these circumstances, which are not ideal because actually Nebraska and Texas should have been playing. Nebraska and Texas should have played. They were the two undefeated teams. But, of course, that's not the way it was set up. If you won the Big 8, you went to the Orange Bowl. If you won the Big 10 and Pac-10, you went to the Rose Bowl. If you won the Southwest Conference, you went to the Cotton Bowl. And then the rest, the opponents were by invite. So Michigan was invited to play Auburn in the Sugar Bowl. Miami, an understandable choice to go play Nebraska in the Orange Bowl. But in Georgia, as the second-place team in the SEC, to go to the Cotton Bowl. I gave this some hard thought, and based on that schedule, I've got to hand the national championship to Auburn. It's not an ideal situation. Of course, we need a playoff, but I would have voted Auburn number 1, 11-1 against the most difficult schedule in the country, and I reviewed all the schedules. I would have voted Miami number 2 with a win over Nebraska, the Huskers 3, Georgia 4 at 10-1-1, and Texas at number 5, finishing 11-1. Let's look at what this would have looked like in the BCS era. It would have been clear-cut, right? 2 undefeated teams in very strong conferences, very strong schedules, very respected teams. This would have been a no-brainer. Nebraska would have been number 1, Texas number 2, the only undefeated teams. That would have been your national championship game during the BCS era. Okay, during the college football playoff era, let's think about this one. Nebraska, Texas are in. Okay, who else? Well, Auburn, based on its schedule and winning the SEC, they would have been the third team in at 10-1. And then you also have some other interesting options here with Miami as an independent 10-1, Illinois, the Big Ten champion, 10-1, and Georgia at 9-1-1. That would have been your controversy for the 4th position. Miami, Illinois, or Georgia. Georgia, the non-champion. Miami, an independent. Illinois, a Big Ten champion at 9-0 in the conference. A strong conference with both Ohio State and Michigan in the top 10 in the country. And Iowa was close to a top 10 team. So you probably would have had a college football playoff that would have looked like this. Nebraska 1, Texas 2, Auburn 3, and Illinois 4. Miami most likely would not have made a college football playoff in 1983. Had it been played today as well, keep in mind that we didn't have conference championship games. Nebraska would have played Illinois during the regular season. That would have settled that situation between Nebraska and Illinois to take on Michigan. Think about that, Michigan fans. You would have played in a Big Ten championship game. Michigan versus most likely Nebraska is a big favorite against Illinois in the Big Ten championship game. The Big 12 title game would have been Texas and either Oklahoma or Missouri. They both went 5-2 in the conference. Don't believe they played each other. The ACC would have been Clemson-Miami in the ACC championship game. Clemson was on probation, though, so you talk about a mess. Clemson was on probation. Therefore, the team that would have had to be selected for the ACC championship game based on the current divisional format would have either been Wake Forest or NC State. Both those teams were 1-5 in conference play. So again, Miami-Clemson based on their performance on the field, but it could have been a Miami taking on a Wake Forest team that was 1-5 in the conference, or NC State in the ACC championship game. The SEC would have had a rematch in the title game in Atlanta, Auburn, Georgia. Great matchup. So if chalk would have prevailed, Nebraska beats Michigan in the Big Ten championship game. Texas over Oklahoma or Missouri. Miami wins the ACC. Auburn wins the SEC. And then you would have had this college football playoff. It would have been classic. Nebraska, the number 1 seed. Texas 2. Auburn 3, Miami 4. So that Nebraska-Miami matchup would have been a semifinal game, and they would have played the winner of Texas and Auburn. That's 1983. Miami won the national championship with a vote, vaulting from 5-1 with the classic Orange Bowl 31-30 win on the failed 2-point conversion. But Auburn had the best schedule and same record, playing 8 ranked teams and going 11-1. They would have been my national champion in the poll era. And again, the BCS would have been clear-cut with Texas and Nebraska, the only 2 undefeated teams playing, and then a college football playoff under the current conference format looks pretty clear to have been Nebraska, Texas, Auburn, and Miami. We take your requests right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, to break down college football history and whatever debate you have concerning, again, college football history or anything going on today. Right here at the voice of college football. See you next time.